go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for your patience today. Today's webinar is on the introduction to Matrix. And so my goals for today are actually relatively simple. First, help you understand the basics of Matrix, help you become more effective and efficient at prioritizing tasks, projects, and emails, help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Matrix, and then most importantly, provide you tips and tricks on how to prioritize better, and then learn the 20% of the features in Matrix that would give you 80% of the benefits. So the Pareto rule applies here. I want to maximize the impact you have with our system, especially if you're new to Matrix in general. And then hopefully you'll walk away feeling productive and have a strategy to be on top of your personal priorities, but also to be aligned with your team. I've had the privilege to talk to thousands of customers over the years, and so I've seen almost every single use case. And so that is why I encourage you to bring up any questions or challenges that you have specifically, and I'd be happy to cover those. So first, let's talk about why do you even prioritize. There's 3 reasons why customers come to Matrix. The first is to be better at keeping track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. One of the trends I've seen over and over again over the last couple of years is that we're taking on more diverse set of responsibilities than ever before. And so we're getting expectations from so many different people around so many different things. And so being able to keep track of that is extremely difficult. The second is actually create alignment across team members so that everyone knows what's important. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen over and over again, that despite us having better tools and better access to software than ever before, there's a lot of confusion as to what should I be working on? What are my coworkers working on? What are the things I can do to have the most impact within my team and my organization? And then thirdly, to take back controls of emails and meetings. So I assume that, many of you, perhaps like me, just get too many emails, too many meetings, too many conversations in so many different threads. And what happens is that the urgent things come up over and over again and overtake your day. For lack of better words, one of the things that, I experience is that the last email in is typically the first email out, right? And so you might have a very, very important email, but if it was 6 emails ago, you're not going to get to it because you have new ones that's coming in, or new meetings, or someone knocking on your office and asking you questions that may not be even relevant to your work. And so what happens when we don't prioritize is that we start losing sight of what's important and we work on the wrong things. And then you end up feeling busy, but you're not really meeting your goals. And then, of course, you're completely overwhelmed by emails and meetings. And so I think one of the worst things that could happen to any of us is spending all our time and resources working so hard on something that doesn't matter. And so that boils down to it's not about working hard, it's about working on the right things. And so the most impact we can have as an individual is to work on the right things with the right amount of effort. So what is Matrix? It's a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software that helps at 3 different levels. At the individual level, it helps you prioritize your tasks and emails. So then you know exactly what it is that you need to work on within the dimensions of importance and urgency. The second is that actually, if you're able to understand what your priorities are, then you can communicate those priorities to your coworkers. And then similarly, if you know what their priorities are, you can start seeing the mismatches, you can start seeing the misalignments, and actually identifying the issues that you have with your coworkers. And so helping teams stay aligned on key projects so that everyone row in the same direction. And then thirdly, Matrix creates a single source of truth across your whole organizations. An example of that is that when you use Matrix, you're tracking your priorities, you're tracking all the work that you're doing, you're tracking the history of those changes. So when you change your priorities, or you reassign tasks, or you change the due dates, we just track that information as part of the record for that task. And so when you have a new coworker that comes in and takes over a particular task, they're able to see everything that's important. And so Matrix helps with both employee turnovers as well as employee onboarding. Couple things that makes Matrix better than so many other solutions out there. First, we're the only project email and meeting management software that's Microsoft 365 security certified for Teams app, Outlook app, and web app at the same time. We're deeply integrated into Microsoft Teams, Outlook, Copilot. We're probably the most integrated solutions within the Teams and Outlook ecosystem, but it's not required to use Matrix. So you can be using Matrix with Gmail, or you can use Matrix completely independently. But if you do use Microsoft, we're almost a no-brainer with respect to the integrations that we have. Matrix focuses very, very deeply on prioritization. I think hence the product name. And so, when I talk about Matrix and I talk about why people use Matrix, it's really a communication tool to communicate both to yourself and to others what your priorities are at any point in time. There's one unique feature in Matrix called the one-on-one view that provides what I call people-centric collaboration. It's not just about projects. It's not just about tasks. It's about the things you have to do for another person. And so Matrix actually takes the information that you have and gives you perspectives on the work that you have to do for your manager, your clients, your colleagues, regardless of the projects that you're involved in. Matrix is also available as a SaaS solution, which is what I'll be showcasing today. But we have a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, as well as an Azure government cloud solution for state and local governments. And then, of course, managed private Azure deployments for enterprise customers. And one of the things that we're starting to invest in is actually how to use AI to help you specifically on meeting your goals. I mean, I think there's many, many wrong usages of AI. One of the things that we're trying to do is just to simplify the stuff that you're already doing. So what makes Matrix effective is that it helps you determine what needs to be done now, what you need to work on later, what are the things you should delegate, and then with the recognition that priorities are constantly shifting, Matrix offered the one place where everyone can go to know what needs to be done, and that's it. If you use Matrix for nothing else, it's just one simple place for you to have a floating dashboard of your priorities or your team priorities or your organization's priorities, and it's there and it's visible. And then when you have that major disagreement, you have one central place to go and talk about it. Let's start with the fundamentals behind Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that it takes the things that we do and put it into the perspective of two critical dimensions, the dimensions of importance and the dimension of urgency, right? So let me give you an example. Imagine if I asked you to write down a list of 15 things you have to do right now. Okay, you write down that on your piece of paper. What do you work on first? Do you work on the top because that's the first thing that came to your mind? Or do you work on the bottom because that's the last thing you wrote down? Or how do you arbitrarily choose something that's in the middle? And so instead of looking at things from that singular dimension, instead we look at those 15 things and start thinking about which of these things are actually important. Okay, so let's just imagine that 15 things again. Now you have a short list. Maybe it's 8 of these things are truly important. The other 7 aren't that important. Now then, of those 8 that are important, which of these are urgent? What are the fires you have to fight? Clearly, if you think about the work that you have to do, if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is, right? If every single task you have is a fire, then you're going to be firefighting constantly and you're not actually creating value. So what I like about this quote is it's just a very simple concept, but it helps us understand that we have to choose what's important and we have to choose what's urgent. So as a consequence of that quote, I think one of the things that's gotten a lot more popular these days is the concept behind the Eisenhower Matrix. So it's a very simple, powerful time management framework. The idea is that instead of having tasks in a list, you're putting it into 4 quadrants based on that dimensions of importance and urgency. And what it does is it helps us prioritize and then also helps us decide what to do and what not to do. One of the things that Matrix does is actually adapt that over into 4 quadrants. So instead of using a task management software where you have a list of things you have to do, Matrix takes the tasks that you have to do, but put it into these 4 buckets. Quadrant 1, do now. These are your fires. These are your important and urgent tasks. Quadrant 2, plan. These are your important but not urgent tasks. Quadrant 3, delegate. These are urgent things, but perhaps someone else can do it better, or they're not important to you in particular. not important enough to go into quadrant 1 or 2. And then lastly, you shouldn't have anything that's not important and urgent. Instead, you should have the inbox. And this is where it's sort of your catch-all. You'll be able to write things down. A couple of thoughts that I have around the Eisenhower Matrix in general, and in terms of time management and task management in general, is that it is so important to take things out of your head, as in things out of your brain, the things you're thinking about, the tasks you want to work on, the goals you have, and just put it down onto something, right? Now, of course, many of us probably have our notebooks and so forth. We're writing down all those things we want to do. I've talked to customers where literally they're drawing 4-quadrant boxes on pieces of paper every single day and writing things down and then deciding what to work on. So you're doing something similar with Protomatrix, which is to take those things you have to do and categorize into buckets. One of the things that I think is particularly important about writing that down is that it makes it tangible. And the key here is that if you walk around the office and then you ask your coworkers, hey, what are you working on, right? They're going to tell you something, but that's top of mind. As in, that was the last thing they're working on, or that was the last thing they've been thinking about. It's not necessarily the most important. And so we can't really think about the things that are important unless we actively spend time doing it. So one of the advices I have for you and for our customers in general, which is to spend an hour a week, perhaps, on planning your Protomatrix. Open up your Protomatrix software, write down the things you have to do, categorize them to these different buckets, and then maybe the next week, what you do is you look at it again and say, are these priorities still the same? Am I working on the right things that I said I would work on last week? And so that tangible aspect of Protomatrix makes you accountable, makes you realize where is it that you're actually spending your time. 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix creates alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And I will be the first to admit that Protomatrix is not necessarily easy to use because of that exact reason. Because we ask you to go and categorize your tasks into those buckets. And my argument is that that's 50% of the work. Deciding the right things to work on is just as important as executing on those tasks. Again, spending all your effort working on something that you're clients don't care about, or your managers don't care about, or anybody who's a stakeholder in your work do not care about, then what's the point? And so success from using Protomatrix isn't always around finding out what everyone agrees on. It's about discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. One of the advices that I have for you, and if you're especially working with a team, is that just to ask everyone to write down their action items and their goals and their priorities into the Protomatrix, and then walk around the office and compare notes. Imagine being able to see your manager's Protomatrix to see what his or her priorities are. Imagine being able to see your client's priority matrix and see what their true priorities are, right? With the realization that you cannot have everything in quadrant 1. And so when you're able to see that, you can have very, very meaningful conversations. So a couple of tips to shortcut your success. If you're a manager, create a project in Protomatrix for your team and staff meetings, and then screen share it during the meetings. It's really, really simple. When you have that staff meeting and Protomatrix is on the big screen, you just look at it and you say, okay, I see what it is that we need to work on, or what is we need to talk about. And then you can also identify the issues as well. If you see something that should be very important, but is not in quadrant 1, that's where you can focus your attention on and talk about. If you're managing multiple sites or multiple projects, create a Protomatrix project for each of those sites or location or initiative or whatever it is that you have. If you have specific training programs, then what happens with Protomatrix is you can actually build templates. So then you can launch a whole new project with all of your action items, all your due dates automatically. It works really well for things like employee onboarding. So imagine if you have an employee onboarding process that requires everyone to go through a 16-step training. You can actually build that one time in Protomatrix, set the due date to say, you got to do this on day 1, day 2, day 3, right? And then you can actually save as a template. Then we have a new employee. You launch that template, set the start date, and Protomatrix will create all those tasks, all those due dates for you automatically. If you're a business owner, then create a project for each of your departments. The whole idea here is that anything that requires its own set of priorities deserves its own Matrix project. And then lastly, if you're an individual contributor, then create a project for your goals and use it for your promotion request. At the end of the day, all of us need one of those projects, regardless of whether or not we're in any of the other roles. And one of the things I do want to mention is that the webinars are recorded and posted on the website here. And today's webinar is focused on, again, the basics of Matrix with some high level stuff, but then I actually have deep dive into each of these capabilities in some of these other webinars. So if you have any questions around those, be sure to check out the other ones. And then, of course, Matrix training is actually also available in other languages. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo and show you how to put this into practice. As I mentioned, the chat section is a fantastic place to put questions, and then I'll get to those questions the moment I'm done with my presentation here. Okay, now I have my Matrix open. So you should be able to see my Matrix. I'm going to walk you through the structure of Matrix. I'm going to walk you through the features of Matrix, and then I'm also going to try to give you some tips and guidance along the way. First, let's talk about the structure of Matrix. On the left-hand side here is the list of projects. And so as an example, you can see some of the demo projects I have here. I have my personal priorities that's selected. And then in the middle is the 4 quadrants, right? Front and center every single time. I select a project, I see the do now, do later, not important, and then inbox. And so these are the tasks that I have. And then within each of these tasks, they fit within these 4 quadrants. And then as an example, down here on the bottom right, these are 2 tasks that I have. So let's start by creating a task. So for example, I want to follow up with webinar participants. This is something that I have to do. So obviously I'll follow up with all of you afterwards. And then the way it works in Matrix is we use what's called natural language to process some of these things that you type into the system. So when I say follow up with webinar participants, this is a task I have to do. But the important thing around creating tasks is actually setting due dates. And this is something that I recommend everyone spend time doing, which is set the proper due dates. And so then you can better understand that dimension of importance and then urgency. So I'm going to go ahead and say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. And when I create a task here, what it does is Matrix actually uses natural language to process that task name. And so what that means is that now that I've created that task, on the right-hand side, the item detail shows up, and you can see that here in the due date section, it actually automatically created the due date for me along with the time based on my local time. So when you say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. your time, then it automatically uses your local time to figure out the proper time for that. Now, I could have written anything else. I could say due in 2 weeks, due in 3 days, due in 2 hours, and that's just part of the process in which how you can use Matrix. Now, on the right-hand side with the item details, there's a couple of things to note. First, you have that item name, right? I can actually click on this, modify the name if I need to. And then at the top, it actually says what project this is in. So this is a way for me to categorize my information. So the project is at the top. I can actually click on this and move this task if it belongs in another project. To the left of that is actually 2 buttons. The first is star. When I star a task, it goes to the top of the list within each of those quadrants. So starring is a way to say that this is an important task or this is an active task. So my general recommendation is you can have up to like 5 or 10 star tasks. The reason why I wouldn't have more than that, because you end up with that same problem. If everything is starred, then nothing is starred. And so only star the tasks that are truly important. So what I do is I actively star things and unstar things all the time. Below that is icons. When you click on icons, you get to add a visual representation of what this task is. So for example, I go ahead and choose the email icon. It actually doesn't do anything specifically to the task itself, aside from adding this visual, but also it ends up actually creating meta information that later you can use to actually run reports. As an example, let's say, if you have a task and then you tag them as emails, then some other tasks, you tag them as phone calls or travel, etc. Then later you can actually get reports to show how much effort you're spending on emails, how much effort you're spending on travel, etc. So That's what you can look at that information as. I noticed that someone actually raised their hand. I actually can't see the chat right now. So go ahead and just send any questions you have in the chat itself, and I'd be happy to address it after I'm done with the demo part here. Now, below that, we have a couple of other things. We have owner. So there can only one owner for a task. So since I created this, it shows me as an owner, but I can actually assign it to another person. So the whole idea around Party Matrix is that first you can have an understanding of the task that you have, but in a collaborative environment, you're able to take that same task and ask someone else to do it, right? And so now you can see how, their avatar shows up. It shows up here in the quadrants as well. So you can easily look at the quadrants and see who's responsible for what, who's working on what, and then what are their priorities. I'm added as a follower. A follower means somebody who actually gets notifications and updates whenever there are changes to this particular task. As an example, let's say I'm a manager and I assign a task to a coworker. When that coworker makes an update or finishes the task, it's crucial for me to know that it's done. And so by being a follower, I get that notification as needed. Or in another situation, there's a task that's not relevant to you at all, but you're interested to know the progress of that task, if there's communications around that task, or files that's uploaded, or comments that's being sent, then you can add yourself as a follower to the task. Then you get that update. To the right of that is progress. It goes from 0 to 100%. If it goes 100%, then it's marked as done and it gets hidden and you can actually pull it up later. Or you can just actually, move the progress bar forward and then use that as a way to filter information as needed. And then you have effort. It's a way for you to set how much effort a task is, because not all tasks are created equal. And then you have due dates, which I mentioned to you. And then you have reminders. And so this is actually one of my favorite features in Party Matrix. And due dates and reminders are the two features I want all of you to use. So if you use almost no other features in item details, use due dates and reminders. And let me explain the difference. Imagine you have a really critical project that you need to work on, and it's going to take you 3 days of work to execute. You set a due date for next Friday, and then next Friday comes, you realize, wait a minute, how can I get 3 days worth of work done in one day? So what happens instead is you set a reminder ahead of time. And reminders is different from a start date. A start date just puts it on your calendar. But a reminder is a way to trigger to make sure that it's top of mind. So here's how it works for me. What I do is I would go and type remind me daily. So now on a daily basis, I will get a reminder to work on this task even well before the start date, well before the due date. And so when I have an important task, and again, this is how I use my Party Matrix, whenever I have an important task, I would set a due date, something like due in 1 month, and then I would say remind me monthly. The beauty of this is the following. What happens is that when you have something on your calendar, guess what? You kind of think about it, right? Think about it as the due date approaches. And then once the due date passes, you're not going to think about it. You're not going to think about it because you have other things to think about. And so when we talk about due dates and reminders, that's how we can ensure that we work on the right things, because after the due date has passed, the reminders can still trigger. And so then it reminds you to go back to look at something that's overdue, but is important. So my recommendation, set due date, set recurring reminders for anything that's of importance to your work. I cannot stress that enough. And you'll hear me say it over and over again. If you watch any of the webinars, use those features. If you use that religiously, I think you'll find so much value in Party Matrix. Again, helping you solidify that concept of urgency. Our brain is just so fine-tuned to looking at the latest information, the last email that comes in, the last message that's sent to us. Reminders is a way to pop that back to the top of the list to ensure that it's top of mind. It's a really powerful trick. Now below that, you have the place where you have the chat. As you can see, this is where I see a history of the changes in Party Matrix. It's a place where I can communicate with others. So for example, in this case, since I had signed this task to Eugenia, she can go and respond to this task. And now I have communication within the context of this task. As you know, if you're using Microsoft Teams or Slack or chat software, you're talking to your coworkers about 10 different things. And so then in 6 months, when you need to go back and review the conversation, good luck finding exactly what you talked about. So my recommendation around using the chat in Party Matrix is use that as a place to have contextual conversation. If you have a question specifically around this task, put it in the conversation for that task. And the reason is that later on, if someone else needs to take over the job, they can look at the chat history and see everything that's been talked about. That would not be possible if you were using something like, a one-on-one chat inside Teams or Slack or whatever. And what happens is you end up losing that context. You end up losing all that information. So contextual chat is important for that purpose. Party Matrix keeps that record as also all the changes of the due dates automatically for you. It's for your own use. It's nothing about this is necessary for vast majority of people, but once in a while you realize, wait a minute, when did we say we were going to do something, or what was the original due date, and so on. The notes section is where you can actually add information around the task itself. You can add subtasks here as well. And in fact, we're actually, before our notes section was intended to be relatively simple in terms of what you can put, but now you can actually also start putting rich text into the notes section. The fill with AI is actually a really neat feature. What it does is it actually takes the task that you have and actually create the subtasks as needed. So in some cases, one of the things that we try to do is we want to simplify the process for you as much as possible. So when you need to create a series of tasks, use the fill with AI to build out those descriptions and so forth to help people understand what it is they need to do. Lastly, in the resources section is where you can have all the information that's relevant to this task. Again, it boils down to context. If I ask someone to follow webinar participants, then perhaps I need to put the list of emails to follow up, right? Or I need to put the PowerPoint presentation or links or whatever. So Party Matrix, let me put all sorts of information in here. Files, that's very straightforward. But also I can actually attach emails to an existing task. So what happens is I can get an email from a customer and I need to assign that email to somebody. I can actually convert that email into a task and that email gets uploaded into Party Matrix. Or I can actually link to external links such as SharePoint or OneDrive or Dropbox or websites. I can also link other Party Matrix tasks as well. So what that allows me to do is actually build dependency. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to go ahead, link existing item, and actually I can choose another task, and then I can say that this task is caused by or blocked by another task. And so Party Matrix allows you to actually create all these dynamic links between all these tasks and build out Gantt charts and so forth for you automatically. So that's how the item details works. And so as you can see, I can actually add those information. But again, I want to emphasize that you don't need to use everything here, but the things that you should always use is the due date and reminders. Going back to the quadrants here, I created this task in quadrant 4, but let's say this is very important. I just drag it to quadrant 1. And as you can see in Party Matrix, looking at the quadrant view here, I have just a few tasks, so it's easy to see. But imagine if I have a lot more tasks. One of the neat things I can do is actually I can resize the quadrants to focus my time on just quadrant 1. And then when I'm done with that, I focus my time on quadrant 2. And so this simple drag and drop is just a way for me to set my focus, right? And so I happen to use the Eisenhower Matrix in this particular project, but you can actually use you can actually customize the quadrants to whatever it is that works well for you. And so as you can tell, one of the things that's useful here is for you to shift things back and forth to focus on one thing at a time. Party Matrix also provides other views too. So you can actually go to the list view and it'll show you all the tasks, but in list format. Again, all the start items pop to the top of the list. Where I like about the list view is the ability for me to find things that are overdue and find things that are modified and be able to sort them like in an Excel sheet. And so I can click on each of these columns here and sort them. And also, I can actually sort by the icon as well. So I can group my tasks together, right? And then you have the calendar view. Again, anything that has a due date will show up here. So as you can see, I have a couple of tasks here. I can actually just drag and drop task and actually I can click on it and I can work directly in the calendar. I actually don't have to go to the matrix view and I can make those changes. And as you can see, when I move things around, it keeps a record of those changes for me. The reason why it's so useful is if you're assigning somebody a task and it's due in 3 days, and then they change the due dates, you'd want to know, right? And it's so important from a record keeping as well as from a logistics standpoint that you know exactly what changes were made. And so Party Matrix keeps that for you, that history for you, and you're able to see the version control of that as well. Then you have what's called the timeline view. So the timeline view is essentially a Gantt chart, but if you actually create dependencies, it's very valuable for seeing things across months or years. So let me try to re-explain why the different views matter. The quadrant view is very good for seeing priorities. The list view is very good for seeing things that are overdue. The calendar view is very good for seeing things that are due this week or this month. The Gantt chart view is very good for seeing things that are due across months or years. So if you have projects or initiatives that span across, 6 months to 3 years, Party Matrix let you go and zoom out and get a very, very broad perspective. And then finally, you have two other views here. One of them is the reports view, and the reports view actually build real-time report on the information for this particular project on everything that's relevant. So if you use Party Matrix for yourself, when you go to the reports view, you're able to see sort of like your cadence of work. You're able to see the things you're working on. What quadrants are you focusing on? So imagine, if you're finishing tasks in quadrant 3 and not quadrant 1, it'll be very, very obvious here in the reports view. Similarly, if you're using in a team environment, you can actually click on each of these individuals and then drill down on exactly where they're spending their time, where they're spending the effort, how many tasks they created, what are the things that's overdue. So it's extremely powerful for managers. It's extremely useful for individuals just to know how they're spending their effort. So those are the different views I have at the very top here. And now let's go back to the project on the left-hand side. As you can see, I only chose my personal priorities. I can go ahead and switch to another project here. So for example, now I choose goals for 2024. As you can see, my goals are actually, my quadrant names are actually different. So instead of actually do now, do later, I have long-term goals, short-term goals, anti-goals, catch-all. And then on the right-hand side, after I selected the project, it shows me the project details. This is where I can change the project name. I can also star a project. Again, starring a project puts it at the top of the list for your star projects. Now, in my actual work account, I have something like 300 plus projects. So I can't go and browse through 300 plus projects in Party Matrix. Instead, I star the projects that matter to me. My general recommendation, no more than 5 to 10 star projects, right? Because those are you only want to star the ones that are truly important to you. But secondly, don't be afraid of creating projects in Party Matrix. I'm going to show you next how to actually look at information on a broad global scale. But the way Party Matrix works is that every project, you should create a project for anything that is sort of independent of the others, right? So for example, if you have multiple clients and with those clients, you have a lot of different work for them, they each deserve a project. If you have multiple initiatives, they each deserve a project. If you have multiple team members and you are trying to make sure that those priorities are actually very different, that those each deserve its own project. Now in the project details, I have a couple things I can do. First, I can actually add members. So the idea is that when you have a project, when you first create a project, you can create a project for yourself. You're the only person in that project. But maybe you have a team project, you have 5 or 10 direct reports. You can create a project for team priorities and then invite 5 or 10 of your coworkers into here. The idea is that everyone would be on the same page. When your coworker open Party Matrix and go to that goals project, they can see exactly the same information as everyone else. Then you don't have to have a meeting to have alignment. You don't have to have a meeting just to talk about, hey, what are our priorities? What are our goals this week? Instead, you can update Party Matrix and everyone can get that information in real time, asynchronously. And then down below that, you can actually click on each of these quadrant names and customize the quadrant as needed. So my general recommendation is that initially try to use some of the projects format templates that we have. And then once you're somewhat familiar with Party Matrix, look at the quadrants you don't use and the quadrant you do use, and then start customizing them. After you've customized your own matrix, you can actually go to the top right here and save that as a template. So now you can actually save anything that you create as a template, and you can choose to create the template with task or without task. And so if you have a client onboarding process, right? You have, again, 10 things you have to do for a client, and you can say, this is due today, this is due in 3 months, this is due in 6 months. You just build that in Party Matrix one time, save it as a template, and now whenever you have a new client, you just launch that project, and then all those due dates will get created for you. Down below that, you can actually add notes to the project itself. And so that's at the high level what a project details has. Now on the left-hand side here, if we go further down, you can see that I actually also color code a couple of projects. And so if you click on this right here, you can actually change the quadrant colors as well. It's just a way to visualize information. It doesn't actually affect the features, but you might want to choose, certain theme for certain types of projects. Now let's talk about how to create a project. If you click on project here, you choose create project. And when you go to this view, you have a couple of options. The first is a blank project. Blank project is truly a blank matrix. You just type the quadrant name, and then you can actually choose the basic template. So for example, we have basic proto matrix, Eisenhower matrix, getting things done method, a SWOT analysis, etc. And then you can choose a color coding to start. And so when you create that, it creates an empty project for you. My recommendation, if when you are done with this call, go create a few projects, create a personal priority project, right? Then choose a color that suits you, and then create a project for your team priorities, and then create a project for the goals you have for this quarter or the goals you have for this year or something like that. So I recommend that you do that after this call. But I can also choose what's called public templates. Public templates, these are templates that we've created. And so we've actually created 1,000 templates that you can use. But here's a sort of like a short list of a couple things that we have. And so you can actually choose some of these. So one of the ones that I like is actually the 30, 60, 90-day plan. So if you're a new manager or you want to have quarterly goals, that's like a perfect project. Instead of actually having do now, do later, you have the plan for the stuff you're going to work on 30, 60, 90 days. And so you can choose one of these and then you can customize it and then save your own template if needed. Or you can go to My Templates. These are templates that's shared across your team. And so what this allows you to do is actually choose an existing template, and then you can just say the start date and all the tasks will get recreated for you. And then lastly, you can actually create with AI. So what we've done here is we try to go and build the tasks for you based on your goals. As an example, you can go in and say, get promoted from project manager to senior project manager. So this is something, again, that you can try. Go ahead and type that in, then you click next here, and Proto Matrix will build the tasks out for you. And then you can use that as a starting point to fulfill whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Obviously, there's a couple of other ways to create projects, including our very, very powerful CSV system as well. So that's how you create projects. And then within the project, you have those tasks. So now let's talk about all those alerts and reminders that we mentioned earlier. When you start Proto Matrix, you go into what's called the home view. This is sort of like where you start when you open up the app. And so in the home view, there's a section called alerts, and this is where that number comes from. 72 indicates that I have 72 alerts that requires my attention. What are the things that pops up here? Examples include tasks that you've delegated to others that's been updated, tasks that others have delegated to you, tasks that have due dates that triggered, or tasks that have reminders that triggered, right? And so it's very, very simple. These are things that are relevant and relevant to you specifically. And so whenever you browse through these here, you can see that, it goes away. And so your alert section gets cleared. One of the things I like to do sometimes is that, if things get a little bit too noisy, I can actually clear older notifications up here. So when you use Proto Matrix, this is the place where you go to find out if you need to respond to various tasks and so forth. In this view as well, you can actually go to the visited. And so these are tasks that you've visited. So this happens all the time, which is you have a task that someone assigned you, you view that task, and then it goes away from the alert. And then you're thinking, wait a minute, what was that task that was assigned to me? That's when you go to the visited view. So that shows you the history of the recently visited items. The agenda view is actually taking all the tasks that you have across your entire Proto Matrix that have due dates that's relevant to you, and it shows up here in your agenda. So these are the tasks that are overdue. These are the tasks that are due today. And then finally, you can go to this list view that shows you everything you have across all of your Proto Matrix as well. One of the things we also do is actually put this add item in so many different places. So my philosophy is that it should be very easy for you to create tasks in Proto Matrix. And so when you use our software, go and you need to create new action items, that's what you click on. And then let's talk about how you use Matrix once you start having a lot more tasks in the system. So on the left-hand side here, there's a couple of other menus. For example, I have what's called the one-on-one. When I go to the one-on-one, it takes everything that I have and put it in the perspective of people. So if you're a manager and you have 5 or 10 direct reports and you want to know, hey, what is Tyler working on? I can actually go to the one-on-one, select Tyler, and now I can actually see all the tasks that he and I have in common across all of my Matrix, regardless of the project it's in. It is a very, very powerful way to make sure that your people are working on the right things. And then it's also a powerful way to actually get a complete understanding of people's workload, and also be able to create new tasks directly from here. So this is very good if you have one-on-ones, right? So as in when you have a one-on-one meeting with somebody, instead of actually having to open a project to create a task and assign to the person, you simply share the screen and talk about the tasks that are coming up in terms of due dates. And then if you need to create new action items, you click on add share task, create the task from here. It automatically assigns you your coworker, automatically add you as a follower. And then in the task name, you can just say, again, due tomorrow, due 2 weeks, and something like that. And Matrix will track that and create the task for you. And then you can even choose what project it goes in. So this takes away that excuse you've probably seen a couple times where someone will say, oh yeah, we talk about doing that, but I never wrote it down, right? You've seen that over and over again. And so this takes away that excuse, because whenever you have that idea, it is so easy to create that shared task directly from here. And as you can see, I can actually switch to another coworker very, very easily. And it shows the task that's assigned to me, but that person follows, and then the tasks that are assigned to that person that I follow. Below here, you have the calendar view. This is the global calendar view. So not only does it show the tasks that I have across one project, but across all my projects. And then I can actually filter and select the project that I need to select. And actually I can build all sorts of calendar to see my schedule for the next weeks or months. And then I have the search view. This is what I call the master view. This view shows me everything I have in my Matrix. So this allows me to actually see the tasks that are coming up, the tasks that are assigned to me, the tasks that are assigned to each person, and so on. And so each of these are some fixed views here, but the filter section is where you can find out all the information that you need around everything. And when I say everything, I really do mean it. This is the one place where you can actually build filters and say, what are the things that, Eugenia worked on in quadrant 1 that she finished. So you can see how I can actually build reports like this and then save that as a template. And now if I'm a manager and I want to know people's performance, what is they work on last quarter, or you can build a report for your own workload performance, right? So if you have to do your quarterly reviews, you can just go to here, build your own views, save that, and now you can generate that with one click. And that allows you to show your manager, look at all the things I worked on. And then you have the global Gantt chart. And then one last thing I'll show you in the global view here is what I call the workload management. This is where you can see what people's workload are, how busy they are on particular days over the next few weeks. So you can see how I can actually see whether, Eugenia is very busy or Tyler's very busy, and actually drill down as needed and reassign work as needed. So if you're like an agency and you're bringing on a new client and you need to know who should I assign it to, this is the view. And not only that, you can actually change to see based on effort, how much effort, people have on their plate. If you have 60 hours worth of work in 40 hours, maybe some things will be dropped. The quality of work will be not as great. So Matrix gives you all that insight just from that item details you saw earlier. Okay, I'm going to switch gear a little bit and talk about email management. So here, when I go to my Outlook, Matrix is one of the best email integrations in the Microsoft ecosystem. And so when I have an email, so let's just say I get an email from a important customer, and I need to make sure that I don't drop that email. Well, here's a couple of things I can do. First, I can actually use the Outlook extension. So if you go to apps here, click on add apps and search for Matrix, turn email into task. So we have a couple of integrations with Microsoft, but the one that you want is turn email into task. When I choose that, I can actually take this email and click prioritize email. What this does is it actually takes the email, lets me capture the email as a task. It uses the subject as the item name. I can customize this as needed. Then I can choose what quadrant it goes in and what project it goes in. Let me give you an example. Let's just say if you work with like 5 or 10 clients as an accounting firm or something like that. Now you get an email from a client and you want to make sure that you actually respond to it, right? If you flag the emails, sure, you may get back to it, but if you have 50 flags emails, you may not get back to it on time and you're not able to set proper due dates or assign it to proper people. So instead, what you do is you take that email and now you can convert into a task, organize it into the appropriate client project, and then choose the quadrants and then set a due date. Party Matrix will now automatically send you alerts as that due date comes, and then you can even set recurring reminders afterwards to make sure that you get to that email. And Party Matrix actually uploads the EML file into the quadrants. So then if you need to assign that to another person, they can open that email file and respond to it. But here's another cool feature in Protomatrix that I haven't seen in any other application, which is the ability to take an email and attach it to an existing task. So again, let's say you have a client that follows up and they say, hey, could you review whatever task before? Instead of creating a new task, you can actually open Protomatrix and then choose open Protomatrix here, and then attach the email to an existing task. You can simply search for the task and then click attach here. So now you can actually attach multiple emails to a task. You can attach documents, right? The work that you're doing for them, presentation, quotes, order details, or website links, or link to other items or SharePoint files, all in the resources section. So that's a very, very unique capability. Now, the cool part about Protomatrix is how it integrates into the other Microsoft systems as well. On the left-hand side here, you can actually click on apps and then go click add apps and add Protomatrix. In this case, I can actually add Protomatrix, pin it to the left-hand side, and now I have the entire Protomatrix app within Outlook. I don't even have to go to the web app. I don't have to install Protomatrix as a desktop application. If I spend all my time in Outlook, Protomatrix is right here for me, and I can see all the tasks that I have without leaving this Outlook app. And then similarly, in Teams, you can have the same thing. You can actually click on Add Apps, search for Protomatrix, and pin it, and now I can have the entire Protomatrix app within Teams. And now, if I'm a Microsoft user, I don't have to go and install anything else. I don't have to visit any website. I don't have to open any desktop application. The information is there as needed. What's really neat about Protomatrix is how deeply we integrate with Teams. So I'll give you some examples here. I can actually go to a conversation with a coworker, click on the one-on-one view, and see that one-on-one view that I showed you earlier within Protomatrix. Instead, I can actually have these one-on-one views automatically show up for each of the people that I work with. And the way you add that is simply click on plus up here, choose Protomatrix, and then choose the one-on-one view and choose your coworker. It is so powerful because you are chatting with a coworker already. Might as well add the one-on-one view to see all the tasks you have in common with them. And what's nice too is in the chat section here, if I have a conversation with somebody inside Teams, I can actually click on that conversation and create a task from that conversation. Protomatrix will link back to this moment in time when you had this conversation. So imagine if you and a coworker are talking about something, you create a task in Protomatrix, and then in 6 months, you were wondering what else you talked about. You can click on the link in Protomatrix, and it will take you back to Teams, and it shows you exactly when you said whatever it is that you said. Now, of course, Protomatrix also has these extensions down here. You can actually click on Protomatrix down here to actually send action cards and so forth. And then also, I recommend installing the Protomatrix chatbot because this is where you can get that notifications, the reminders triggers, right? The due dates or delegation, etc. And so Protomatrix will give you that information and you can actually click on this and open up the task and respond to it as needed. We also have integrations into Microsoft Copilot. We're actually one of the very, very first applications that integrates with Microsoft Copilot. So if you're an enterprise customers, Protomatrix is there. We also have integration into team meetings and then into a couple of other things around workflow automations and so forth. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and go back to my presentation. So let's talk about what you should do. If you do nothing else, make sure you sign up for Matrix and actually put some of the things I talked about today into practice. And then if you use Teams and Outlook, add those Teams and Outlook app. Now, sometimes you have to go through IT. They have to do the approval process. It's relatively straightforward since Matrix is a Microsoft 365 security certified solutions. We're very, very few applications that has that certifications, which means we're tested and reviewed by Microsoft security experts to meet all industry standards. And then in terms of creating projects, I recommend creating those projects that highlight your top priorities, your personal priority project, your team priority projects, your goals, or whatever it is that truly matters for you right now. And then importantly, if you want to really take Matrix to the next level, ask your coworkers to do the same. If they don't do anything else aside from create a project, put down their priorities. And then when you guys have meetings, just share screen or put it up as a place for you to view. That's all it takes. And then if you're a manager at your staff meetings, show the team priorities, right? Take it out of your brain, put it in something tangible so your fellow team members will know. And then compare notes. That's the key. And again, one of the things I want to emphasize is that it's not so obvious that success from Matrix isn't always around making sure that everyone's aligned. It's ensuring that everyone is aware of the misalignment. Because if you're always aware of exactly what everyone else is doing, it's no big deal. You don't need any software system. You just got to execute, right? But what happens is there's all these implied things that we have in our head, thinking that others are on the same page as us when we're not. And then if you're ambitious, create a project for some of the things you want to achieve, such as, get a promotion or whatever, and then invite other team members to actually share projects together. Some advice, use Matrix to track high impact tasks. You can decide the level in which you can use Matrix. Do you want to use Matrix on a daily basis, track all the stuff you have to work on a daily basis? Or do you want to use Matrix on a weekly basis? So then you dedicate an hour a week just to go and update everything to make sure you're thinking about the right things, working on the right things. Or do you want to use Matrix to track the bigger goals, as in these are the things you have to do on a quarterly basis or monthly basis? Think of Matrix as a communication tool, right? And again, I mentioned how it's a tangible and explicit way to put down the things that you're working on. And then thirdly, use Matrix to manage your individual goals. I may not have emphasized it enough, but success with Matrix boils down to you as the individual. If you're successful as an individual, everything else will fall into place. But if you're struggling, then it's hard to get it to work. And so Matrix works really well for those who just have so much on their plates, or for those who are actually constantly thinking about whether or not you're working on the right things. What success with Matrix should look like? One, on a personal level, you check Matrix every week to remind you of your goals. You have one central place to track all your priorities. And then on a team level, everyone on your team understands and are aligned on key tasks. And that if you have important emails, you prioritize them, you triage them, and then be able to see everyone's priorities in real time asynchronously. You don't have to have a meeting just to be aligned. You can open Matrix and look, and then be able to click on those priorities and ask questions as needed. With that, I conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to field any questions that's been sent in the chat. Thank you so much for your time. Okay, so I have a couple questions here. Does Matrix work with Google Workspace? So Matrix does not have to use Microsoft in order to work. One of the things you can do in Matrix is that you can actually use our Chrome extension. So one of the things I'll show you right here is if I open up Matrix again, as you can see how I can actually work with Matrix on the web app. So that means you can work Matrix on even if you don't use Microsoft. But you can actually, in Chrome, you can actually install the Chrome extension, and you can also install the Gmail extension. So the Gmail extension is not as powerful as the Outlook extension, but you can actually take any emails and convert into a task. But Matrix also has a unique features called the inbox. So if you go to inbox here, you have what's called the secret address. And so you can copy this email address, save it as a contact in Gmail. And now, instead of actually, I'll show you how, instead of actually clicking on an extension to create a task, I can actually just go and forward the email to my inbox address and create a task directly from here. So let me give you an example. Due tomorrow, remind me daily. And so I can take any email in Gmail or any mail system in particular and forward it into Matrix, set the due date, set recurring reminders. This is what I do all the time. So on my phone, I actually use Apple Mail. And so I don't have an Outlook extension there. But if I get an email that's important, I just forward it into my Matrix, and then I just type this thing that I just showed you here, due tomorrow, remind me daily, or due in 2 weeks, or remind me weekly, things like that. And Matrix will create the task from that email and set those due dates for you. So it does work in Google Workspace from that perspective. Great question around, does it work with external team members? The answer is yes. So when you use Matrix, one of the things you can do, for example, here, is that in the project, I can actually create a project and add external team members as well. So it can have external people as well as internal people. So it's all permission control. If you are a consultant, for example, you can actually get a different type of license with Matrix that allows you to license clients. And so in that case, they don't see each other. And so the clients would actually have, they can use their emails, but they actually wouldn't see each other as collaborators. Also, you're able to share Matrix as read-only view. So let's just say if you want to share with external people your Matrix, you can actually get this special link that you can share to them. They can see the project, but cannot edit it. So that's how you can work with others who are external. Now, of course, if you share a project with an external party, then they see everything within this project. So keep that in mind. Oh yeah, to show how to create a sample email into a task. So I'll show you 2 different ways. So here, for example, this email, I showed you how I create this inbox here. Due for August 7th. So we're going to go ahead and create that task right here. I'm going to go ahead and click send. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking an email and creating a task from that by forwarding, but also I can actually click on this, turn email into task, prioritize email, and now I can have an email and go ahead and prioritize it. I'm going to go ahead and choose a project. I'm going to go ahead and choose the accounting project here, and I'm going to choose quadrant 1. I'm going to go ahead and set a due date to next week or 2 weeks from now. I click capture email. So you can see the moment I do that, it actually is taking that email, create a task, and now this view right here is exactly the item detail view, right? That's the same view as you saw in my web application, item details. It shows me the task name, the project it's in, the owner, the due dates, and then if I click on resources, the EML file is right here. So if I need to assign it to another person, Eugenia can now open this task and then go to resources and open that email file. If I go back to my Matrix, I click on accounting, there's the task. So that task was just created just now with those due dates and that email file, and it's assigned to Eugenia. So very, very simple way to create any task from emails. And you can do this for a bunch of emails, and Matrix will automatically look for duplicates. So essentially, if you have multiple coworkers that's CC'd on an email and you create a task from that email, Matrix will give you a warning that says, hey, by the way, this might have been converted to a task already. So it'll save you on that effort as well. So that's how you create a task. Great question. And then, of course, earlier, I forwarded emails to my inbox. And so you can see that I can actually follow up. Let's see, this is, I guess, a previous example here, but I forwarded the email into Matrix. Usually when you forward an email into Matrix, it takes around like 2 minutes or something like that for the system to process that and create a task from it. Fantastic questions. Now, if there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me, hi@affluence.com. And as I mentioned, this webinar will be posted afterwards. And then if you have, if you want to learn more about the reporting views or Gantt chart view, check out that particular webinar. And if you're interested in email management masterclass, I also have a webinar on that. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.